Let me tell you 3 facts about the marathon. It's a really long way. If you hit the wall, it absolutely sucks, physically, mentally, all those good things. And 3, if you don't get the training right, you're very likely to hit the wall. You must teach your body how to burn fuel the right way so that you've got enough energy to get yourself to the finish line. My name's Scullion. I'm a 2-hour marathon runner, and today I want to talk to you about slowing things down to help you get to that finish line faster. During your marathon training build-up, if you're never willing to slow things down and almost assume that you're not as fit as you think you are, you're never really teaching your body to be as efficient as it possibly can. The marathon is a game of, I have X amount of fuel and I need it to last me the distance of the marathon. And that's all you're trying to do. You're trying to preserve fuel. I've learned the hard way in many marathons where I feel fantastic, it feels easy, but I forgot that you're really in a race against how much fuel am I burning and how far away is the finish line. And so you can feel easy, aerobically it can feel easy, your breathing can feel easy, but what's happening is under the surface, you're burning too much fuel. You're using up too much energy. And so today we're going to talk about slowing things down. And by slowing things down, you guarantee, or as close to guarantee as you can possibly get, that you're actually working the right energy system. By working the right energy system, you're teaching your body to burn equal probably parts fat and carbohydrates, hopefully more fat. And what that does is let you free up some of your glycogen storage, and that's going to get you to the finish line. If you get this wrong, a lot of people smash a training build up. A lot of people think that they've trained amazingly, better than ever before. But then on race day, you know that feeling when you get to mile 18 or mile 20. There's no coincidence that around 18 or 20, that's when you find out if you were preserving your fuel or if you weren't. You get to mile 18, you get to mile 20, you've ran out of fuel, you're in deep shit. It's that simple. If you don't get your training right, if you're doing your training too fast during your marathon build-up, you teach your body to use way too much carbohydrates, you hit the wall at mile 18 or 20, you fall apart. Shit hits the fan. If you slow things down, you end up feeling better later in the race, you teach your body to use more fat than carbohydrate, and you get yourself to the finish line in the fastest pace possible. That's what we're talking about today. So I think I might have a new favorite super shoe, and rather than, make it all complicated and tease blah blah blah, I've been testing the Scullion Endorphin Elite 2. This is not a sponsored video, I bought them myself. The problem I'm facing on that note is I do need to do another shoe test where I sort of compare the Asics, the Alpha Fly, and now the Scullion. The problem I'm facing is that I've now probably wore the Scullion a little bit too much, and if we're being honest, I should probably get a pair of Adidas Adios 4. I think they were brilliant out of box, but I think they got a little bit tired. So really where I'm going with this is, if I'm going to do another shoe test, it could nearly cost me £1,000. So if you want to be kind and support me at 262clo.com, or just subscribe to this video, comment below, it all helps. But if you jump on 262clo.com, I think there's over 350 5-star reviews now. It's kind of a people helping people. It'll help you guys out. The more sort of support I get, the easier it is for me to justify likely spending £1,000 to do a shoe test video. Even if nobody buys anything off 262clo.com, I still plan to do another shoe test video. These Scullion Endorphin Elite 2s, I'm a really big fan. But what I've sort of been thinking about this whole shoe test game, I'm not sure if it would have the same impact at maybe 2 hour 50 pace, 3 hours 10 minutes pace. And so I'm kind of tempted in my next sort of shoe test is to do maybe literally, I'm not joking, maybe a 20-mile run, and maybe each 5 mile I change shoe and I'm running at a more, call it viewer-friendly pace. Does that make sense? So do you want to comment below? What I mean by that is maybe 2 hours 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours 50 for the marathon, rather than me running at 4:55 to 5 minutes per mile, and try to tell you guys that this is going to be a great shoe for you to wear. So have a little think about that. The reason I'm telling you that is because that's the shoe that I was wearing today, and today we were slowing things down. That's the purpose of today's video. Sometimes you just need to slow things down. I'm guilty of forcing the fitness forward, always pushing the pace, always trying to get the most out of my body. And we're kind of going to talk a little bit about the breakdown of that. How much of your training do you want to dedicate to, I want to push my sort of fitness forward, I want to push my ceiling higher. And then how much of your training do you want to take that little step back? And by taking that little step back and slowing things down, then you work the right energy system. And that's sort of what marathon's all about. It's all about that fueling, all about keeping your glycogen storage in a good place to get you to the finish line. Fitness is kind of linked to that. Obviously, the fitter you are, the faster you can hopefully run while burning less fuel, but it's not always directly correlated. It probably is, but you do need to teach your body to be very efficient at sort of burning fat and less carbohydrates. I slow things down today. The session was 5 times 8 minutes with 2 minutes recovery, and you slow things down enough that you still get the same sort of benefits, but runners are guilty of, trying to hit the upper zone all the time. We're always trying to if your heart rate range is 150 to 160, you're always 159, 160, 161. And so on a day like today, you really take a step back and you go right in the middle of the zone, or almost at the beginning, the bottom of that sort of zone. And you're just trying to protect that when I leave today, I want to make sure that I know for a fact my body was kind of using the right energy system. It was right above that sort of zone 2, but we're at the bottom end of probably zone 3 and a 5 sort of zone model. And my lactate came in at 1.5. That's a direct correlation to how much carbohydrates you're using, which means I'm using bugger all. But better to sit at the bottom end of that range and guarantee that you're sort of nailing it. And by nailing it, I don't mean pace. I mean teaching the body to be really efficient, but at a decent pace, at the sort of quickest pace possible, but still burning the right sort of fuel. But, let's talk about that session a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about the Saucony shoe, and then maybe some session examples that you guys might be able to do and how you might want to practice slowing some of this stuff down, just to tick that box that you did do some training to teach your body to be really efficient in that sort of fat sort of area, but also a little bit of carbohydrates. So, the session you already know, I don't love the pace of this session. It frustrates me because if there's any wind or anything like that, you're not able to push. You almost have to hold back and not press into it, because if you press into the effort, what tends to happen is that heart rate will go up, and then sort of how much energy and how much fuel you're using will go up. It's kind of like going up a hill in the car and you're revving and you're trying to keep the revs under 2, maybe 2.5. And literally if you go up a hill, it's almost impossible to keep it there. And that's sort of what's happening in a session like today. I like to be able to, if it gets tough, if there's a bit of wind, if there is a hill, if I'm racing somebody, I like to be able to sort of push and accelerate. But that's when you run into trouble and you end up using up more glycogen, more fuel than you have. And it's a bit like, think of the marathon and think of fueling the marathon like you have this big bag of sand on your back. And every time you push a little bit over your limit, you're sticking a knife in your bag of sand. And you only have so much sand to get you to the finish line. So you really can't stick too many knives in your bag of sand, or you end up running out of fuel. That's when you hit the wall. That's when you don't get to the finish line. And so you need to be really sensible with sessions like today, because you're also teaching yourself that discipline that is, paramount to success at the marathon. And I'll tell you sort of an example of that. I did really well at Dublin in I think it was 19. I hadn't raced amazing at the World Championships. And then in Dublin 2019, I decided that no matter what happens, up until mile 16 or 17, I had to keep my heart rate under 166, I believe, at the time. And I'll try to put a screenshot up here on the screen of the Strava. And what ends up happening is I knew that there was going to be people sitting on me. I knew that I wasn't going to enjoy that. And I knew I'd want to push. But I basically just made this deal with myself that I'll wait until mile 15 or 16 and then off you go. And I think I went from maybe 10th or 11th place I ended up 3rd. I ended up on the podium. And the purpose of telling you that was because I had done Dublin a year or two before, and I had done the opposite. And I'd been sort of leading and I'd been up at the front, and basically I'd been sticking effing, knives into my bag of sand. and I ended up falling apart, I think coming in 10th or 11th, having led the thing for, you know, much of the sort of mile 18, mile 19, mile 20. And that's why it's so, so important. So a day like today, you're really teaching yourself to be patient. You're really teaching yourself to not get frustrated. If you sort of see that heart rate creeping, you know, just slow it down. That's all you've got to do. And that really, really helps. But it was a really good session. You know, I would love it to be faster, but I executed it really well, and we'll keep playing that in the background while I talk about the other stuff. So, you know, it's also important to fuel a day like today. And so I actually ended up having, I think it was 75 grams of carbs in just over the sort of 50 minutes. And so I'm really trying to dial in to 80 to 100 grams per hour, almost 100 grams per hour. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that you jump in with that, but do try about 60 grams, or even like start with 40 and build it up. I really think this is an area that people are not taken seriously, is what you could say. This is huge. I mean, huge. This is buying you probably like 2 or 3 mile at the end of the race. So by getting these carbs in, getting these gels in, you're buying yourself more miles at the end that you can maintain that same effort, but you've topped up that sort of fuel reserve. And so that's really, really important. So there has to be a balance with this stuff. And days like today, if you slow everything down all the time, I don't think a day like today makes you fitter, which I hate the word fitter, but a day like today isn't going to move your fitness hugely forward. What you're doing is teaching your body to be more efficient. So you leave the sort of training place a more efficient athlete. Your fitness from a general perspective might improve a little bit, but you probably could have done something different, like zone 4 training, or, you know, some VO2 max training, and your hypothetical fitness, well, it would have went higher. It sort of would have been better that day. You'd be better off if your goal was to improve fitness. You might have been better off doing the sort of zone 4 work or the zone 5 work. But the problem is the marathon isn't just about fitness. So the way you want to balance your sort of training is you see it as like, maybe you've got like pretend it's like 3 scales, and you've got like your general fitness, and you want to sort of like turn that dial a little bit. You know, it goes up. And then you've got your like, how efficient am I right now for marathon? And if you haven't really done any of this slower stuff in sort of maybe 10 days, 14 days, well, then you have to turn that up a little bit. You know, you have to grow that. And then you've sort of got your, I also need to be really durable. And your really durable is, have you done those sort of like longer runs? Have you gone the distance? Have you got your psychology, your body physically, your legs? Have you got them to a place, the blisters, all the feet stuff, all the learning? Have you got all that stuff to a good place to handle the marathon? So there's no point being really fit, no point being really, really efficient, but you haven't sort of calloused the body and the brain to be able to handle the marathon. And that's your sort of 3. So sometimes you're sort of like pushing the fitness up, and you're doing your VO2 max stuff, and you're doing your sort of like your tempo-y type stuff, your zone 4 stuff, you know, your good hard, whether it's 10K effort for you or whether it's half marathon effort. For me, it's half marathon effort. It's around that sort of 60-minute mark. And then you've got to do your really efficient stuff. And the really efficient stuff, I have to say, will probably have the biggest impact on your race result, but it's almost the most frustrating part to do, because you don't get to push, and runners love to push, and that's what becomes really frustrating about a day like today. You know, so let me give you some examples of these kind of sessions that you could start to build in. They're all in the training plans that are also on 262clo.com, but nowhere near the, you know, explanation that maybe you've got from today. And so I probably started with 4 times 8 minutes a few weeks ago, and you know, that's sort of sitting around that 32-minute mark. I always take 90 seconds to 2 minutes rest. On this loop that I'm doing today, it just sort of, you know, correlates that when I sort of finish the loop, it takes 2 minutes or 2 minutes 30 to finish the second loop. And so that's why I took that rest. I don't jog the rest, but I also don't run it super quick. But I sort of keep things moving because I'm a big fan that, you know, in the marathon, you're not really planning to stop. So you can start with about 30 minutes worth of effort, and you can build that right up to probably 70 or 80 minutes of effort, maybe even 90 minutes of effort. It'll likely get to a point where I might be doing something like 5 times 15 minutes at this kind of effort, still with that sort of 2 to 3 minute jog rest. I've already repeated this session. I've been super busy with work, I'm learning the hard way that when you start a business, you can't do everything yourself and you rely on other people. And then if other people leave, it throws you into a bit of bother. This session here was actually probably about 2 weeks ago, and I've already repeated it. Instead of 5 times 8 minutes, I did 5 times 10 minutes. So that was just a little example of how things can progress. You can move it from 5 times 8 minutes being, what's my quick maths, is that 40 minutes? To 5 times 10 minutes, you're up to 50 minutes already. And you can see where this is going. If you run it too quickly, or if it starts to get hot and your heart rate starts to drift, you just need to back off a little bit. Take a bit more rest, maybe take a longer sort of break. You could do something like 3 times 10 minutes with 2 to 3 minutes rest. And then if you're noticing that heart rate drift, well, maybe just sort of jog, stroke walk for 5, maybe even 10 minutes. Let everything calm down and then start again. I see it in cycling that cyclists are almost willing to take much longer recovery, but then do more blocks of this kind of work. And I think in running, we're always trying to rush it. You know, we always think it has to be done right now. You know, 1 minute rest, 90 seconds rest. It's like, there's nothing stopping you taking a 10-minute sort of jog rest and then doing your 3 times 10 minutes again, letting that heart rate come down, letting maybe your body temperature come down a little bit and get stuck back into it. So that's a couple of ways that you might want to progress into this kind of training. And like I said, there is training plans on 262klo.com, which all they're doing is giving you that structure, giving you the routine and giving you something to follow. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you're going to slow some things down to sort of work on that efficiency. Do comment, do like, do subscribe, do check out 262klo.com, and please take care.